Going on, everyone? It's your guy, Cole Jackson, back with another episode here on Two Guys Watching Football, where we are going to wrap up day one of the 2022 Baltimore Ravens draft. Get ready for day two. Got rounds 3 and 4 tonight. No shortage of stories. I don't know who had that in their mock draft. It's kind of funny when I look out there and you guys probably saw it on Twitter. I did that thread that was like top team needs and then players by round that would fit them. Safety and wide receiver were not on my list, and I didn't even have Tyler Linderbaum as an option on my center need. So I mean, it was an interesting kind of outcome. So let's go. Let's start with number one. We'll kind of work throughout the draft, and let's start with Kyle Hamilton. So this was your classic Baltimore Ravens best player available pick. There's not much more to say about it. If you go to pretty much any rankings list, everyone had him as a top 10 talent in this draft that could fall because of positional value. And so that's kind of where I want to start quickly here on Hamilton specifically, because the Ravens just signed Marcus Williams to a monster deal. They bring in Kyle Hamilton. I think some folks are kind of wondering, was this a redundancy? Is this, a poor allocation? You have Chuck Clark, Geno Stone look pretty good. Brandon Stevens looked pretty good in a safety role. So, how's this all going to play out? So I think the biggest thing I'd say with Kyle Hamilton on tape, and I have his snap numbers right here in terms of where he lined up. So he lined up 114 times deep, 87 times in the box, and then 227 times in the slot. So I think I've only watched 2 games on Hamilton. I'm going to be diving into him and doing a film room next week to really get into it. But in the 2 games I watched of him, and this was way back in January, so I'm a little off in terms of my remembering it. I just think people don't realize how his usage is going to be here. You saw Mike McDonald at Michigan use 3 safety looks consistently. You saw him having someone playing deep. You saw Dax Hill playing in the slot a lot, and then you had another kind of playing the Romer robber role. And so I think what this does for Kyle Hamilton specifically is, Marcus Williams is going to take care of all your issues that you have in the deep center field. That's his game. His game is, I'm going to start 10 yards off the ball, and I'm going to end up 20 yards downfield, 30 yards downfield. He's that true center fielder that the Ravens have needed. So I guess the question becomes, is this redundant to a Chuck Clark? And the answer is kind of, but the talent difference is just so crazy to me. Like, it's that different. He's the kind of guy, and I got, James Ogden obviously has a phenomenal piece out, which is the draft guide. So I'm looking at it right now. So his summary on him: attacking, versatile, explosive, high processing, defensive weapon, tackles with desire and competence, some question marks on angles when going backwards. But the word that he used there that I think is the most important and where I really want to focus this is the defensive weapon part. Ravens fans wanted Derwin James so bad. And Derwin James was that guy that, of course, he can play deep. That's part of his skill set, but he's also a guy that can move all over your defensive formation. So the way you can put him out there is he can play your under robber safety role. He can play split safety. He can even do some high safety, but he can also go down, match up on tight ends. He's going to have to work on his man coverage. He's just naturally taller. He struggles with kind of dipping and turning. And he's probably going to give you some production in the slot against like bigger, more physical slot receivers. Kind of the big slot involvement that we're seeing away from the 5'9" guys that work in the slot. So I think the way I see Kyle Hamilton being used here is a defensive weapon that can move around. I would feel nervous if I didn't have a defensive coordinator with a history of using these types of safety looks, but it's literally one of the most noticeable features of a Mike McDonald defense from his time at Michigan. So I think it makes a ton of sense. I think you also, Trevor makes the key comment here, and I agree. I love Chuck Clark, and I do love Chuck Clark, but he should not stop you from taking a player like Kyle Hamilton. He's just that good. And it was, like I said, it's your typical BPA pick. They could have went in more of a need direction. We saw Jermaine Johnson slip. Obviously, there was something going on there. I had heard whispers about some potential character concerns, going as far as saying there were at least two teams that had him off their board. You see him slip to 26, so it kind of verifies that for you. And they could have went a couple other directions. Thank God they didn't go Trevor Penning. So I know I got you and I Raven in here. Sorry, brother. I just didn't want it at 14. So again, this felt like the typical BPA move for the Ravens, classic Ravens. And I see the usage being pretty clear here, where he can really thrive. I think James kept him. He said his long speed was the only reason he wasn't a 5-star, which would have given him a red star in James' definition, and that's some pretty high praise. So, like I said, I think he's going to fit in really well here in terms of over allocation at safety and what those safeties can do to help out your corners. Look no further than the NFL's number one defense last year, and that was the Buffalo Bills. Yes, they have Tre'Davious White. We have Marlon Humphrey. But I mean, Teron Johnson just kind of came along in the last 2 years as a slot. Levi Wallace wasn't overly, impressive. They were looking for a corner. You just saw them trade up and take Kyrie Elam. The strength in that defense was their defensive line, and it was their safety play, having Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer back there. I think the Ravens are now in a position to do very similar things. So I think the residual effect is it's going to really help out the corners. When you can play split safeties with Kyle Hamilton next to Marcus Williams, it's just your corners can be so much more aggressive. It really puts Marcus Peters in a position to succeed. There's a lot of things that I think could be really beneficial to the defense overall. But again, as a matchup, Kyle Hamilton can go a long way in helping out your tight end woes that you've had for years and years and years. You can use them in under coverage and a robber role, which will help your middle of the field coverage, which has also been an issue with this defense. Marcus Williams enables Kyle Hamilton to play his best role on this team. So that's what I see as kind of the biggest value add of Kyle Hamilton. The value is incredible. He was number 6 on Dane Brugler's big board. Pretty much everyone had him top 10. The Ravens get him at 14. I understand some of the concerns around positional value, over allocation in the secondary, but it's been the Ravens' blueprint. They've spent at corner, they've spent at DB, and they've lived with a lesser pass rush. It's not what fans want, so I understand that, but it seems like it's a part of their blueprint. So shifting now into, I guess I was shocked. I mean, there was that rumor that was put out yesterday, but I don't think anyone really saw it coming. And if I would have expected it to happen earlier in the day than actually during the first round, but that was trading Hollywood Brown to the Arizona Cardinals with pick 100 and getting back pick 22, or 23, sorry. If you do the JJ chart conversion of the difference between pick 23 and pick 100, it's the equivalent JJ points of pick 28. So they essentially got a first round pick back for Hollywood Brown. And so the stuff just came out in an interview that he did that basically explains why he demanded a trade. And so he verified one thing that I think is really important. He did demand a trade. That wasn't the Ravens trying to say, to kind of say we wanted to trade him. He asked it. It's 30 in a row where players asked out of the Ravens scheme. We saw Hayden Hurst. I shouldn't say scheme, off the offense. We saw Hayden Hurst go. Hayden Hurst made sense because he wanted that opportunity to cash in on a second contract. He wasn't going to get that with Mark Andrews in front of him. So I think it's a little bit different in the optics with Hollywood Brown. You saw Orlando Brown go, but I would say that's more similar to Hayden Hurst. He wanted to be a left tackle. I don't see the Ravens shelling out $20+ million for both of their tackles. I think they would have paid him as the highest right tackle in the league. Would they have gone over 20 million like he's probably going to get up in the Chiefs? Probably not. So that seemed to be money motivated. You can add in the legacy stuff. I'm not sure how much I buy into that, but nonetheless. And now Hollywood Brown, and he specifically said he didn't like the system. And he said he didn't like his role or wasn't getting the ball. He was 10th in the NFL in targets last year. Like that's ridiculous. But, the question is he didn't like the system. And we've heard this, are wide receivers going to want to play wide receiver in a Greg Roman offense? So there's people out there that have been saying that. It's the first time we've seen a wide receiver basically refer to the system as a reason for not wanting to be in Baltimore. So I usually try and avoid narratives, but that gives you some sort of evidence that maybe that narrative has some facts to it. So, I tweeted the opinion on the targets and getting the ball. That's nonsense. He's gotten his fair share of targets. Fans are upset that the ball seemed to be getting forced to Hollywood Brown. So I mean that part of it I just don't get. But in the system, I have seen numerous times doing, especially watching the run game, doing my film reviews of the O line. There's times where they're asking Hollywood Brown to come inside from a tight alignment and crack down on a linebacker, and he misses those blocks more often than he makes them. And so I think the requirement to be a run blocker in this offense probably doesn't fit very well with Marquise Brown's skill set. And we know that. I mean, he's a smaller wide receiver. He's not overly physical. He doesn't have that dog mentality. But the thing that does where he does fit the system, and so I guess this would be the key question when you look at the system fit, is Greg Roman had success in 2019 with the run game and short passes that really pulled defenses up to the line of scrimmage and spread them horizontally across the field. And that's why we were getting guys for the first time in forever in a Baltimore Ravens uniform running deep down the field wide open. So the idea that I think is being conceptualized by Greg Roman is I'm going to run the ball. We know that. I'm going to get teams up at the line of scrimmage, and we're going to use leveled concepts to try and spread them horizontally. But then I'm going to send vertical seams, vertical go routes, that sort of thing, and try and push it over their head. Theoretically, it makes sense. Has it been implemented in the best way? Has it been executed in the best way? All very valid questions. So on one hand, I see how Marquise Brown's skill set fits that blueprint that Greg Roman wants to do. But does he want to be in here run blocking as much as he is? I just don't see it. It does make you wonder about the initial pick. Did they just pick him because Lamar said that's the guy I want? Did they pick him because he fit that blueprint of the vertical stretch game? There's a lot of questions. Obviously, you look at a guy like AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, seem like better fits for the offense because they can do a little bit of both of those things within the system. But they get back pick 23. They trade back, pick up pick 130, and move back to 25 two spots, which was a genius trade. I don't know if Dan's in here right now, but Dan was on my live stream last night, and he said they're going to flip that pick 130 for a future third round pick, and basically trade back two spots, take who they were going to take anyway, and pick up a future third. So that's just get to asset management in the draft. But they take Tyler Linderbaum, who's been, let's call him, I had a bet that I just had to pay $100 for that the Ravens would not draft Tyler Linderbaum. I just didn't think they'd do it. When I did my film room on him, all his best clips are him out in space in the run game, running outside zone. And the Ravens are a gap-heavy run offense. They do have zone concepts installed. One of the big things that the Ravens did in 2020 and how Greg Roman did evolve the running game was using outside zone to set up the counter bash. And we saw Lamar splash touchdowns against, Dallas, Philly, the Washington football team. There was another one. And that kind of became a key cog in this offense. So, Tyler Linderbaum fits that type of model. The Ravens also run heavy power where he's going to be asked to down block on the big, heavy nose tackles, the DJ Readers of the world, especially in this division, Stephon Tuitt, Cam Hayward. So he does his best work when he's getting out in space and creating vertical displacement and moving guys upfield where you're just pushing guys out of the way with your supreme athleticism. So that's why I was down on the pick. So, I put it out there last night. The big thing is taking him at pick 25 is a lot different than pick 14 to me. Especially when you were looking at the board, are you taking a Kyle Hamilton? Are you taking a better scheme fit offensive lineman? Or are you taking Tyler Linderbaum? But at 25, it's just different optics. So, the concern in pass protection is going to be how much can he pass block one-on-one against those big heavies? Are they going to have to help him with some guard help at times? And so on that note, because I think people might look at that and be like, well, why did we draft him if we need to help him? That's just like a smaller center thing. Brandon Thorne said it on Matt Waldman's podcast. You can go listen to the pre-draft episode from last week it was an O-line preview talking about Jason Kelce and how much the Eagles help Jason Kelce inside and ask their tackles to play on an island. That's just good offensive line scheming. Anytime you have a smaller center that's under 300 pounds, they're going to be at a disadvantage against these guys that are 340, 350 playing that one tech. So you're always going to give, they use Brandon Brooks to kind of help him out in those situations. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, and you're living with it because he can be an elite run blocker. So that's kind of the trade-off. So the big thing with Tyler Linderbaum, where he has the upside, I wrote a report on him, elite mover in space, like absolutely elite, one of the best outside zone blocking centers I've ever seen. Was significantly better in that regard, in my opinion, than Garrett Bradbury, who is a common comparison. And I say that because Bradbury would get to his spot in the same elite way that Tyler Linderbaum did, but Linderbaum has a dog mentality. He was getting to guys, reaching them, taking over the leverage point, and then attacking and drive blocking, and that's the difference. Where he struggled in the run game was down block situations or one-on-one situations. I'll point you to the Wisconsin game where they basically sat Leo Chanel in the A gap with a one tech in the other A gap to take away the combo block situation, and they forced Tyler Linderbaum to just drive block, and he didn't do as well. So how's that going to work in a down block system? It might be a struggle, or he's such a battler that he's going to figure it out. That's going to be the development that you want to see from him. So in terms of, I've heard some concerns raised about his arm length. You guys that have been on my channel before, I don't give a crap about arm length. I look at their hand skill and their leverage creation. Elite in that regard. You see it in there's a pass block against the one tech from Wisconsin that's one-on-one in the game I did the film review on, and he just out leverages the crap out of whoever the one tech is. He's number 91. I can't think of his name, and just literally hip tosses him because he created such great leverage. So that's without elite length. He doesn't need it because he's so good with his hand fighting. Spencer Schultz always says that he's black belt certified, and he is. His hand placement is that good. He plays with powerful hands. UNI Panthers mentioning it right here. He did wrestle through high school, and he's famously regarded for when I think he was a high school senior in the Iowa State tournament where he pinned Tristan Wirfs, who went on to win state that year. Tristan Wirfs has a lot of size on Tyler Linderbaum. So the fact that he was able to use that leverage, that shows how he fights. So that is really impressive. I think that's going to do him wonders as an NFL pro. So I do have some concerns. I've made them very well known. Those concerns are definitely limited by taking him later in the first round. Everyone said this is a guy that he has generational upside. He really does. I thought he would achieve that all-pro kind of accolade earlier in an outside zone offense. Maybe you see Baltimore transition to more zone. So, what does that mean? So Baltimore is a multiple run scheme in the sense that they have zone and gap scheme concepts installed in their offense, but they have always leaned, and this is just a Greg Roman thing, towards running gap. It's one of those things where even when you look at the Titans, who have been a zone-heavy offense, they still do have gap concepts installed. They just lean zone. So we're the opposite, and we lean gap. But the fact that those concepts are already installed in the offense means you can deploy them to put guys in a position to have success. So this is where it's on Greg Roman to see a bit of a shift in his play calling. He's still going to be gap-heavy, but maybe it goes to more 60-40 versus the 70-30 it's been. So that's just where I think you have to do a little bit of adjustment to put this guy in a position to have success, but that's just good coaching. And so as much as we have concerns with Greg Roman, as much as we have concerns with the pass game, etc., he has already shown significant shifts in his run game to capitalize on skill sets. And I say that's mostly the introduction of the counter bash in 2020 and how he used outside zone to set that up. So I do have confidence there. Yeah, good question from Dan. Should we draft Leo Chanel and have them battle to help his development? I was always saying, what would it have looked like if he had to drive block, Jordan Davis in a one-on-one situation? That's where, that's not going to be an advantageous matchup. That's 340, 350 against 290, 300. It's just going to be tough. But again, he has that dog mentality that Garrett Bradbury didn't have. So that's what's going to help him in terms of his development. So that leaves us, that's kind of a recap of day one. That was last night. Now we're moving into a very, very interesting day two. The Ravens have 9 picks left. They have 2 tonight at pick 45 and pick 76. Then they have about every single fourth round pick that exists. Well, they have 6. Um, and then a pick in the 6th round. So, what are the biggest needs? And you guys, if you're in here and you want to start like a little bit of a Q&A, throw your questions in and I'll get to them when we wrap up here. This will probably be a quick one. But I want to talk about day 2 and kind of what we could do moving forward. So the way I see it, and it's kind of funny because we haven't addressed one of our top 5 needs. I had them listed 1 to 8, I think. And that was without wide receiver. So they addressed center, which was need number 6 for me. But I had pass rush, corner, and offensive tackle as my top 3. So edge, now you're considering the wide receiver need. Where do you slide it in? I would probably slide it into need number 3. I think, well, maybe need number 2, actually. I'd probably move it above corner because I think Kyle Hamilton helps your corner situation. I think having Brandon Stevenson or Darius Washington with slot corner ability means you're really looking for depth, probably not a day 1 starter, which is a good situation. They also have to have a vet lined up, whether it's, Bradbury getting cut and they know that and they're going to sign him, whether it's AJ Boye, whether it's, Bryce Callahan or Chris Harris Jr., the kid from Denver, if I have that right. That could very well be the plan to make it make sense. So I would put wide receiver at number 2. I have pass rush at number 1. The concern I guess I have is you have 2 picks tonight, 45 and 76, and you have some pretty big needs where, some of the names that I'm interested in, I'm seeing them thrown out in the chat. George Pickens is my number 1 wide receiver that I want to go get. I think, when we talk about the culture fit, the run blocking requirements in this offense, George Pickens will come in and happily block for you. I don't think that's going to be a concern. He is one of the most aggressive wide receivers. Well, he's probably the most aggressive in this draft, but one of the more aggressive ones I've watched coming out. So I think Pickens makes a ton of sense. He fits the offense. He also has good vertical speed. So what I'm talking about earlier with other guys that would kind of fit, he's going to come in. He's going to be a willing blocker. He's basically, I think Spencer called him this, but he's basically Miles Mankin, where he's going to come in and play like a grown man in the actual receiving game, but also execute the blocks that Miles Boykin did, and where that was such a value add to the offense. So I think, right off the bat, he's number 1 for me in terms of targets. When you look at some of the pass rushers, I think Josh Pascal makes a ton of sense. I think you would get from him what you were looking for in that Zadarius Smith signing. I think he's going to come in and he can play some rush linebacker for you, but he can also reduce to the 4-eye 3 tech on obvious passing downs, which helps you get Bowser when he's healthy beside Odafe Owe. Sorry, I just brain fired down the name. So I think Drake Jackson's still out there. He's an interesting name as a true speed rusher. Basically, what I want to see the Ravens do at pass rush is in the next, today and tomorrow, I want to see them get 2. I want 1 power rusher that projects as an inside rusher, and I want 1, speed rusher, someone that they can develop in that mold. So I think that, I guess the saving grace of all of this is it is a deep edge class, and it's not just, I feel like every year we say this position to this, but this is actually a deep edge class. Dane Brugler had, I think, 19 guys ranked as top as round 3 talents or better. That's a lot of depth. So I mean, I could see them going today and going corner and receiver, and even waiting till tomorrow to double dip at edge. Not necessarily what I'm hoping they do, but I think you could see this. Good question here. Where do you think Ojabo goes? Any chance he's there at 76? I think he's going to go early today, to be honest. And so Ojabo's an interesting one because you might get Ojabo back by October at the best, November, December, playoffs, January at, maybe more realistic. I think the problem is Ojabo is a very raw prospect when healthy. You were going to need to do work with him to get him ready. He was probably going to come in as a situational pass rusher only in year 1, but with freakish upside. So I thought, it could have made sense, but it does concern me that he's not going to have a full training camp. He's not going to get those early week reps in, and then you're going to kind of insert him in November, December off an Achilles injury. I just don't know how much he's going to be able to contribute to a team that's trying to contend for the playoffs in year one. So that's kind of my concern. I think he'll go before 45. Would I take him at 45? I'm going to be completely honest. I see the upside. And I mean, if they decide, we're not going for it all this year, we want to get ready for 2023. We can get aggressive in free agency. We're going to extend Lamar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then maybe it does make sense because you will have Lamar's cheapest 2 years in the next two if they sign him next summer. So maybe that does make sense. But in terms of, getting Ojabo in here, he's not going to be a significant factor in 2022. He might go as far as being in a redshirt year. He might not even play this year. It all depends on how that Achilles goes. I think Cam Akers gave us some unrealistic expectations about how quickly guys can get back. So that's what I'm thinking there. So should the Ravens trade up twice for Pickens and Pascal with 45 and 76? I absolutely would. I'd leverage those. If you could come out of tonight with those two, addressing your two biggest needs, and then you're going into, you're going to have to give up some force to do that. They have 6 of them. But if you're going into, tomorrow with a couple of those, say 3 4th round picks where they can hit on, another corner, another corner, probably a linebacker, maybe a running back, maybe a tight end, I think you're in a good position. So I would absolutely do that. A lot of talk in here about Bateman being a wide receiver 1. I mean, the wide receiver 1 talk is tough. Do I think Rashad Bateman projects as a wide receiver 1? I think he can get there. Do I think he's going to come out the gate and be it in year 2? Probably a lot to ask. Ideally, you want to see him prove a little bit more. I think he proved a lot to us last year. The fact that he was able to kind of come off injury and make an impact. You saw the chain moving. You saw him be able to pick up yak, break tackles. I think he fits really well in this offense. He has that speed that can stretch. He's a great route runner. I was reminded of it this year watching Daniel Falele from 2019 when he was on Minnesota with Bateman. And, you saw what he did against some of those defenses. He was destroying teams. So he definitely has potential, but, I don't want to be like, don't worry about it. Bateman's going to be the number 1 this year. He's going to have to prove that. That's just the reality. Does he have the potential to get there? Absolutely he does. I think he's got that full, complete wide receiver ability where he can be a strong route runner. He can beat you deep. He can beat you underneath. I think he has that upside. So yeah, see, like this, I just don't like, I don't get that. Like, he's definitely good enough to play, but not wide receiver number 1 at all. I mean, I guess I don't know what your definition of wide receiver 1 is. A wide receiver 1 to me is a complete wide receiver, can run the full route tree, can beat you at multiple levels. Again, he needs to prove it, and that's an important piece. But does he project with that skill set? He absolutely does. So, yeah, route runner. Thanks, Tony. So, moving in, would Giants take a couple 4th rounders for Tony? Tony's situation's weird. He does kind of fit in that sense of he's got vertical speed. He can make guys miss in the open field. He can do a little bit of that Z work that Hollywood does. He can play in the slot where he'd probably be more of a gadget type guy in terms of the play usage, but he's just going to give you a more dynamic player than Hollywood, but maybe less downfield route running ability. So, I mean, Tony's interesting. I still think it's weird that, they want out on him so quickly. I know they have a new coaching staff and I get it, but it's like, usually if you're a new coaching staff and you come in and you have a wide receiver weapon like that, is that not usually a good thing? So without kind of the background information there, it is kind of concerning. What about Scary Terry? They finalized that yet? I haven't paid attention. So they haven't. I mean, like, technically speaking, Terry McLaurin and DK Metcalf were quote unquote available for trades. Debo is quote unquote available for trades. How realistic is that availability? What are they asking for? Were they looking for 1st rounders in this draft? Are they looking for draft compensation next draft? That's kind of the key question there. Definitely interested in trading for one. I just don't know. Like, would you trade a future first for a DK, a Debo? Yeah, and we are back in the wide receiver purgatory where we have a ton of questions. someone just mentioned Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett does make sense. He fits that kind of mold. Again, Z slot type skill set. But that is the downside of losing a Hollywood Brown is we kind of went from, okay, we have some wide receivers finally. We need to solidify the O-line in this draft. Oh, never mind. We kind of made a step forward in our O-line, but then we traded Hollywood. So, it does in a way, if someone says, I feel like they went 2 steps forward and 1 step back, I hear you, because that does kind of feel how it was. So I think that's through. So Dan saying Lockett doesn't make sense salary-wise. So this is a good point because Dan's like my dad when I'm at the grocery store. I want to take all the cookies and throw them in the shopping basket, but I don't know how much they cost, and I'm not the one paying for it. And then Dan has to slap my hand. So this happens all the time. So I don't know. I just kind of shout things that I want, and then I let Dan figure out the cap situation for me. That's how we work. So if you guys have any more questions, throw them in. It's the Ravens' mindset to pick up older wide receivers that teams are done playing with. It's kind of true. That does feel Ravens-esque in terms of how they used to do it. But then you saw the transition with Eric DeCosta. You saw them go draft heavy with wide receivers versus going the vet route. So that's kind of been the tough part with me anyway, is why it just felt weird to kind of, it sounds like Hollywood just didn't like being in Baltimore, and that's why he wanted out, which is unfortunate. But there are some vets out there. I think Jarvis Landry fits this offense. Again, he brings the right mindset. He brings a good skill set. He doesn't have the same type of vertical movement, but he could, like Andrews and Landry in the middle of the field with, a guy like Bateman and Duvernay and Tylan Wallace that can kind of stretch the field. I think that actually makes sense. So, I'd like to see them get a little aggressive tonight. Go get some guys. Go get George Pickens. I think George Pickens solves a lot of your problems. Try and move up for Josh Pascal. Move up for both. It's going to cost you picks for sure, but it's probably going to be worth it. So, that's how I see it playing out. I'm going to wrap this up right now. I just want to do this quickly over lunch, kind of touch base. Those are kind of some of my thoughts. I appreciate everybody in the chat. If you guys can do me a favor, look in the bottom right of your corner, hit that like button. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it. Hit subscribe if it's your first time here. So that's all I have for you guys. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. Peace out.